everyone, Brianne here from Hooked on Homemade Happiness. Welcome back to my channel. Today in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to crochet the Tunisian full stitch. In this tutorial, it is assumed that you have a basic Tunisian crochet knowledge. If you do not, there is a video linked below for a beginner Tunisian crocheter, and you can go ahead and check that out, and then come on back and crochet the full stitch with us. For this tutorial, I'm using a J 6mm crochet hook and worsted weight yarn.
So for this tutorial, I'm just going to get my yarn on my hook and I'm going to chain 10 for this tutorial. This stitch can use any number of chains. No, there's no particular multiple. So any number of chains, I'm going to be chaining 10. And we are just going to start with our regular Tunisian foundation row. So I'm going to be starting in the second chain from my hook using these back bumps of my chain. I will insert my hook into that second chain from the hook, pull up a loop. I'm going to be gathering stitches on my hook in that manner for my forward pass for that foundation row. And here's my last chain. You should have the same number of stitches on your hook as chains that you started out with. So here I have my 10 stitches on my hook. And now I'm going to do my return pass, which is just your typical Tunisian crochet return pass. So we will chain 1 and then yarn over and pull through 2 all the way across until there is just 1 loop remaining on your hook. And there is our foundation row. Now what we're going to be doing is inserting our hook in between these stitch spaces and gathering our yarn on our hook in these spaces here. So I'm going to start with this very first space in between this first stitch and the second stitch where I'm going to insert my hook there and then yarn over and pull up a loop. And then the next space in between the next 2 stitches is where I'm going to insert my hook. I'm going to do that across my row, stopping just before the final space. So finding it's really easy to spot. I love this stitch because it's so easy to spot where you need to insert your hook. So here is the second to last space. So here's the last space between my last stitch and then this edge here. So I'm going to skip this last space and just insert my hook into my edge stitch. So here we're going to grab those 2 loops along the side and pull up a loop. So there's our forward pass for row 2. You should still have 10 stitches on your hook. So now I'm going to do my return pass. I'm going to chain 1 and then yarn over and pull through 2 all the way across my row until there is 1 loop left on my hook. All right, so that was row 2 for the full stitch. Now for the next row, we're going to kind of start in the opposite. So we're going to skip this first stitch here and make sure to work into the last stitch. So we're going to alternate these 2 rows. So that row we just did and then this next row. So now for this next row, we are going to skip this first space and work into the second space. So they're going to be alternating. And then continue inserting your hook in those spaces between the stitches across the row. And then here's my second to last stitch or space, and here's the very last space. I'm going to insert my hook into that last space. Since I skipped the first one in this row, I want to make sure I work into that last one so I have the same number of stitches. Now I'm going to still also do my edge stitch here, inserting your hook into that last stitch, and then pull up a loop for your forward pass. That's row 3. And for my turn pass, chain 1, yarn over, pull through 2 all the way across my row until there is 1 loop left on my hook. So now for this stitch, you just continue alternating those last 2 rows that we did. So in our next row, we'll start in the very first space, skipping the last space. So we're going to start again in this very first space between the first and the second stitches. That's where I'm going to insert my hook and pull up a loop. And I'm going to do that all the way across my row, inserting in these spaces between stitches, stopping before the last space. So here's the second to last space. Here's my last space. I'm going to skip that space and just do my very last stitch along the edge here, where I insert in those 2 loops along the side. And there's the forward pass. Now return pass, chain 1, and then yarn over, pull through 2 all the way across. So for my next row, since I did the first space in the previous row, my next one, I'm going to skip the first space and work into the next one. I'm going to skip this first one and go into the next one. And then I'm going to do that all the way across my row, including the very last space. So we're just staggering them and alternating those 2 rows. So here's my second to last space, and here's my very last space. I'm going to work into that last space and my final stitch along the edge here, and then return pass. And there you have the full stitch. Just gives such a pretty texture. It's one of my favorite Tunisian stitches. So continue to repeat those alternating those 2 rows, working in between the spaces of your stitches. So if you work into the first space, you're going to skip the last one. And then in the following row, you'll skip the first one and make sure to work in the last one, alternating those 2 rows until your project is the length that you're looking for. And then come on back here and we will bind off our project. Here I have done a couple more rows of the full stitch, and we're going to bind off our stitches now. So to do that, we're going to be inserting our hook into the vertical bars across our row. So I'm going to insert my hook into that vertical bar right here, yarn over, pull the loop through the bar,
and then through the loop on my hook. We're making slip stitches across the top to close up all of our stitches. So insert your hook into the next vertical bar, yarn over and pull the yarn through that bar and through the loop on your hook. And we're just going to continue that across our row, continuing to insert a hook into that vertical bar and pulling the loop all the way through. And here's my last vertical bar. And then after this, I'm going to do my edge stitch just like we've been doing throughout this pattern. So you can pull that all the way through. Go ahead and snip your yarn and pull it through the Tunisian Full Stitch. I love this stitch. It's one of my favorite Tunisian stitches. I love the woven look that it has, and it creates such a soft and squishy texture. I think this stitch would be really nice for a pillow or maybe a basket with the woven look that it has. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time.